There's 28 slides. However, we're only going to concentrate on one slide. That's in slide 18. The rest of the slides I'm just going to do in 30 seconds each, just to make a few points. Okay, so the first question is, why this presentation? Okay, the reason for it is data at rest encryption can mitigate a lot of the high-profile breaches that are occurring. Second reason for this presentation, I was sitting in the audience just like you some time ago, and somebody in the audience just raised their hand and said, what is data at rest encryption? And me and my friend said, hey, we have some experience doing it, and so let's do a presentation, because we've received a lot of education from other people at this forum. Now, the reason why we're going to concentrate on slide 18 is the value we're going to bring, or at least we hope we're going to bring some value, is tell you about the observed confusion that we saw when people tried to implement data at rest encryption. So we'll go through our experience there. And finally, the way the world's going right now is, for example, yesterday President Obama did a speech, and it was all about encryption. And just to give you an idea, the Payment Card Industry Security Standards Council recommends end-to-end encryption. So the world's changing, and perhaps we thought we could help people with some of our experience. Okay, so I'm going to go through a few slides. First one I'd like to do is try to set the stage in terms of what the threat environment is. So the key point here is that the number of malware threats from outside has gone up dramatically since 2001. And what's interesting here is that this also shows a spike in the theft of physical media. And that'll be more relevant later in the presentation. Also, the sources of threats are changing. In 1998, when I went to a security convention, it was really simple. We said 70% were internal and 30% external. World's changed a little bit to this in 2015, but also in 2015, you have all sorts of bad actors. And what we've also been seeing, it's almost becoming at a fast and furious rate, is the number of really high-profile breaches. I should say that the original presentation was in December 8th. It was a 15-minute one that we have periodically. That was the same day as the Sony breach. But what's changing here is the size of the losses, and CEOs are now losing their jobs. The Ashley Madison CEO just lost his job a few weeks ago, and the Target CEO lost her job. So it's getting serious attention. But also the number of breaches, the number of records being stolen is increasing quite a bit. Now over here, the reason why I put the little red dots there is that I'm also showing how people are removing portable media. And also the value of each breach is getting higher and higher. In the US, exceeds around 5 billion. And you see what you're seeing across the world in terms of the value of each breach. Now this one, to me, was kind of stunning, because in 2011, I was just, that's when we were doing the project, and I was just looking at the health industry trade rags. And I'm looking at it going, man, these guys are getting hit. They're getting hit hard, but nobody knows about it because they're relatively small breaches, not big enough to make the front page of the New York Times. But I said in 2011, these guys are in trouble. And we were also talking some healthcare. It was kind of lax, okay? And to give you a little color, Tom always wants to do something much heavier duty because he's military national intelligence, and I'm trying to pull him back because there's practical limits to this. But you see how things changed for healthcare? They're coming after healthcare pretty heavily right now. And this is the Experian forecast. Experian is one of those rating agencies. First one is rise and fall of payment breaches, because they're putting the chips in credit cards now. So that's why they think they're going to fall a little bit. But the clouds are being targeted mostly by phishing. It's very unsophisticated. Healthcare, like I mentioned, is being targeted. This is about the CEOs losing their jobs. Employee mistakes, like Chase Bank, which is astounding. I was really surprised when Chase got hit. Somebody left the unpacked server, because I spent my early career with $100 billion banks, okay? You know, whenever there's money, things get really serious. And I was surprised those guys got hit. And other thing is third-party breaches. That, I think that's how they got into Home Depot, with a third-party contractor. Okay, the Netnet is FBI says you're going to be hacked. Have a plan. And you could think of data at rest security as merely your last line of defense. It's not the be end all. It's just one element of a strategy. But if you're going to get hit, you might as well plan for it. Now what I'm going to do is set up different ways of doing it. There's no right way to do it. There's many ways to do it based on the value of the data, the performance requirements. This right here is how EMC VMAX does it. VMAX is what I call a tier 1 enterprise storage machine. The other equivalent is the HDS, VSP, HDS meaning Hitachi Data Systems. At least from my perspective, those are the two highest end commercial storage systems in the world. Imagine, you know, a big bank with 50 of those at, you know, $4 million each. That's just the hardware. 20, 30,000 servers. So that's the type of environment I'm talking about. And I'll talk more about how they do it in the future. So the key takeaways as we move toward slide 18 is data at rest can help mitigate damages. And now here's where there was a lot of confusion. We spent weeks arguing over this. So I'm trying to simplify it to 3 real simple points. What's the purpose of data at rest encryption? 1, protect media removed due to authorized service calls. The simple scenario is you got thousands of disk drives. They got to be removed for service. You just want to make sure that nobody's reading them. Okay, real simple. Unauthorized removal of media. Somebody's inside. They pick one up and they walk away with it. Okay. The third one is assuming a breach and assuming they didn't get, phish somebody's username and password. Somebody gaining access to the files and just siphoning them off in whatever methodology they're using. Now, the key thing, because I'm trying to be non-dogmatic about this because it all depends on your situation, but the 2 key themes are, depends on the value of what's being protected, and defense in depth and defense in breadth, because this is just one element of a lot of security. And the reason I say that, people were getting confused with application-based security, database security, firewalls, and SSL. I want to eliminate all that stuff and keep this to a real simple conversation. So the way to try to simplify this is, this discussion is not about data in flight, which is, let's say, SSL coming over the network. And what it is data at rest when it's resting on storage media. Okay, and the orientation of this is toward high-end commercial data centers. What I'm not orientating toward is the small Windows workgroups. And the reason why I say that is, if you have a small Windows workgroup with relatively, let's say, non-valuable information, the requirements and what you do to protect that is going to be a lot different than, let's say, the tier 1 enterprise storage that, let's say, the big banks are doing, where you got deposits coming in from 3,000 branches and thousands of ATMs from all over the world 24/7. And also, since there's more value in a commercial account, especially if you've got money involved, the type of person we're trying to defend against is a little more rigorous. State-sponsored terrorists, where these guys have a lot of resources to get a whole bunch of servers and do a brute force attack if need be. Organized crime, they have the resources, they can pay for the expertise. And some of the hacktivist subcultures out there. There's no perfect answer, and again, it depends on the value of what's being protected. Now what's interesting, and we're going to give you an update based on some research we did on some updates from Intel February 2015, but you're also going to be seeing some national intelligence military stuff kind of creep into the commercial space. It's always a trade-off, because once you get too complicated, it becomes hard to operate. So it's always a balancing act. Now, one question people ask themselves, and I'm just doing this to say there's a lot of different options. I'm not telling you what's right or wrong. I'm just saying here's things to think about. Is you can put it in the controller or the server, like a lot of storage devices, it's just a pair of super micro servers with Intel processors. And the trade-off is it's cheap because Intel processors now have crypto capability, but the trade-off is if you're doing heavy online transaction processing, you might be taking cycles away from that. In addition, these processors throw off so much heat, you can't apply sealant to it. That's a FIPS 140-2 level 2 requirement, which is a NIST requirement. So if you go there, you see all the trade-offs that you have to think about. Now the other way to do it is putting it in the disk controller. This is how the high-end equipment does it. The VSPs and EMC VMAX. They have encrypt, decrypt function in an ASIC, and it's dedicated to that task. And let's say if you got 2,000 or 3,000 disk drives behind it, you can encrypt, decrypt all that. Now, just as a side note, compare that to managing encrypt, decrypt for hundreds, thousands of applications scattered across the world. So there's some trade-offs there. Okay. And another thing that we're seeing is self-encrypting drives. Now I'm seeing that in low-end gear and mid-range gear. I'm not seeing it in real high-end gear. Because one thing to think about is, while it's easy to deploy and implement really fast for time to market, there's a little more cost per drive, but they also keep the key on the drive. Okay, now if the opposing team is heavily resourced and they walk away with that drive, they might, and they have the key, and they can apply brute force to it. Okay. On the other hand, if you have a low value type of situation, nobody's going to be able to figure it out. So again, a bunch of trade-offs. And this is my value of data slide. Because where will a bad actor concentrate the resources? Are they going to be spending it to steal your pictures of grandma's dog? Or are they going to go after this or this? Okay. So again, trying to make that point about the value of the data. Now this is where we're going to spend more of our time, and I'm going to ask Tom to talk more about this right here. So this slide is the basis of our experience, where we saw a lot of confusion, and we're just hoping it'll help you reduce any confusion that you may encounter. So where do you do data at rest encryption? Well, it's separate from in-flight SSL, it's separate from access control, and it helps you scale better when you have than individually setting up encryption at each app and database. Now, the next point is crypto at the CPU level, and we'd like to talk about some of the Intel updates. And the reason why we said this, we caused a little controversy last time we were here, because we looked at pre-February 2015, where they were putting the key in memory and protecting it by an open source piece of software. Okay, since then, Intel's done a lot of work, and I'm going to do the feature function benefit, then I'll turn it over to Tom. So the first change they did was to facilitate disconnecting from the internet when you're doing random number generation. The second thing they did was store the key in a location not accessible by standard software commands. The Intel jargon is putting it in a metallized layer. But I translate it to say they're just making it hard to get at it from standard software commands. The third thing they've done is provide facilities to verify software integrity, because there's another part of the security business, which is examining supply chain, because you don't know if your supplier of a component has been compromised and they're inserting certain things in there. Or if you have your system in place, like those POS terminals, you insert something into the driver. Okay, so this is a technique to provide software integrity. Now we're getting into the spooky stuff. Okay, they've also provided, and this surprised me, they also provided facilities to defend against differential power attacks based on side channel attacks. That's another way of saying somebody standing around reading the electromagnetic signature thrown off by the amount of electrical in there. So that's a quick summary. And Tom, do you want to take over the next portion? And I'm shifting to your slides.
Part of the thing with the Intel, when we first started dealing with Intel, probably back in 2010, they were a long ways away from where I would use them. And over the years, they have made significant progress. And a couple key points that they did was the key generation. One of the things that you don't have to, but we would recommend that when you first get the system, you disconnect from the internet, and they have a NIST-approved RNG. And of course, with any security system, the RNG is probably one of the most important parts that you have. And they do have that in the secure part of the die. The software versions of the keys exist, but they are stored in cache. So they take up a certain amount of cache. So it's a 16-way cache, and 1/16 of that cache will be used for storing keys. And that 1/16 of the cache is also in a secured part of the die, meaning a separate metallization layer where software instructions cannot get to it. They do work closely with the Zinc on key protection, and well, it's cloud error now since it's got Zinc. The generation of the CAC, one of the things I like is it's strong power on reset, and that's within the metallization, and it contains Intel's public key. So when you work with Intel, you can get a nice tech to encrypt your keys.
A KEK is a key encrypting key.
Okay. Any signatures that are needed are stored in flash. So if you have some software that you want to make sure that has not been tampered with, you can run a hashing algorithm, either a SHA-256, SHA-512, or whatever, and work with Intel, they'll generate a signature for that hash. You can store it in a flash. So now, if somebody comes along and wants to alter that software that you have, when they're in power up, when they check that software, it will have a different signature, and then you will know that my code's been hacked. The signature is stored encrypted. You can store them encrypted if you would like. I would always suggest that you do store the signatures encrypted. The signature matching is done in hardware. Intel has added circuitry to prevent differential power analysis attacks. I think if there's any questions on that, we can go over that. Any decryption is also done in the metallization layer of the chip, which meaning again that you're not read what's going on in regular software instructions. You're not allowed to get into that area. We did come out with a new processor line, a server line for Skylake. It launches a thread and executes from an encrypted base in DIMMs. So they have a DIMM, and 200 megabytes are available to store encrypted programming, encrypted data, anything that you would like to protect. Now, anytime you run from those DIMMs, or you read that area of memory outside the processor, you do have a 1/6 performance hit. And one thing I like is the key for that memory is generated in 3 parts. A third of it comes on at boot time, a third of the key is per thread, and a third of it is the actual address of memory. So it would be very difficult for someone to replicate that key. So now the problem is, when you have all these keys, and you don't have to have them, any hundreds of thousands of keys that you have, managing the key generation, matching the keys where the data is stored, is always something that is a problem to take care of. And on the next slide, we have some stuff there. The Princeton University was doing some research on, we were mentioning differential power analysis attacks, and I've also done that too. A lot of people say, hey, I turn off the computer, the data is gone. Well, actually, it's not gone, and that goes right back to certain types of attacks that you can get. The data is sometimes rootable for up to 15, 20 minutes inside the DRAM after power has been off. So there has been areas to take care of that area, and that's what Intel has developed part of that. Now, in DRAM, that's 156 megabyte area to protect against those type of attacks. So, any questions on that, Jeff?
Any questions from the audience? Okay, no questions. I'll say that I have a flash drive here with a couple of white papers on these subjects, and I can let you copy them if you want, if you have your laptop here. But you can also go through this space. But in summary, again, we have a number of trade-offs here and a number of changes. And the first one is this represents what was formerly mostly national intelligence and military type of techniques creeping into consumer-grade equipment. The other point, and I'll just reiterate, the trade-off is if you choose to put Encrypt on your main processor, if you're doing, let's say, a lot of transaction processing, it could take a hit on performance. The other thing is, if you're going to seek to achieve FIPS 140-2 level 2, which is the baseline commercial certification used by all the high-end storage equipment, these things run pretty hot, so you can't put sealant on it. So you're kind of caught between a rock and a hard spot. Okay? And that's why I identified other alternatives that you can think about. So I'm going to keep moving along here. So we covered crypto at the CPU and some of the Intel updates. Next thing, I'd like to talk about key management. Now, key management is actually one of the toughest things to do because, one, managing all the keys, and what I highlighted was 3 areas where we saw a lot of confusion. And we're going to give you our opinion, which some may disagree with, some may think we're right. Okay.
So you mentioned sealing of CPUs.
Right.
Why is that, and how is that?
Okay. I'll give a general answer, then I'm going to ask Tom to add more to it, because that's one of Tom's expertise.
So, what's the question?
Yeah. So the question was, why are sealants applied, let's say, to the CPUs for FIPS 140-2 level 2? Well, why don't you go ahead and answer that one?
Yeah, the main reason why sealants are applied is you don't want, intent has it, there is a thing called differential power analysis attacks, where in some chips, in some FPGAs, encryption has a very distinctive that they're going to feed around. And a lot of people will do register-based designs for that pattern. And when you put the sealant around it, it protects probes from being put on the chip, right? So that you cannot do these differential power analysis attacks. And it prevents, if some of that stuff is in FPGAs, it prevents them from reading out the FPGA. It just takes quite a bit of work to scrape off that sealant.
And could you elaborate more in terms of the work that you've done before in terms of anti-tamper? We're getting to real military stuff, but...
Yeah, look, we've put sealants on a lot of things. And the main reason why you put the sealants on them is you also want to prevent cold boots attacks, right? You want to be able to prevent heat from changing monkeying with a clutch when you start doing the random number generation when you first start up. You want to prevent people from interfering with the reset line. You can also get into the BIOS. You can also get into what Intel's doing or other processes if you're messing with the reset lines. There's a very distinct steps that they go through to bring up the chips and to bring up the system.
Question.
So a lot of stuff for them inserting stuff within the pins of the chip.
So is the chip sealed all around where the pins connect to the board? And is it sealed on top and below?
Well, it's sealed on the top. Okay, so you can't get into within the ball grill race and scrape things off. A lot of times you cannot get into the pins below because the important signals are what they call buried vias. Okay, the blind vias. They're not really coming out to the board. They're buried somewhere. Their traces are buried somewhere in the middle of the board.
I have a question.
Okay. I have another question from audience. Go ahead.
So I guess my understanding of how the CPU...
Louder, please.
My understanding of what the CPU, how the CPU, this is made up, is there's a ceramic top, and then there's a silicone gel for thermal heat transfer, so it's conducive to the transfer of heat to the heat sink and then to the fan. So there's no fan and heat sink at all.
Okay, so the statement was that you've got the ceramic on top and you got an insulating gel, and is your point that with those things you would think that nobody could get into the processor?
Yeah.
Oh, ceramics are great, especially the metal top on SoCs for an attacker. There's nothing better than having a system on a chip and a ceramic metal top, because there's a lot of ways in which to pop off the top and be able to get inside the chip to see whatever it can and start putting codes to it. So they'll sit there, if an attacker, they have something, say, that came off of one of our planes or one of our helicopters, they'll grab that box, and if it takes them, a month to scrape it off, they'll do it. So basically, NIST or NSA does not like SoC or systems on a chip within a ceramic top, because it's very easy. You have to have a lot of protection around it to know if you're being tampered with, if someone's inside the box. A lot of stuff has to be done to get something like that approved.
Do you know what these coatings are made of, the sealants?
So Tom, can you characterize what these sealants are made of?
I wish I could, but a lot of times they're pretty secret about what the sealants are made of. They'll give us what we need, like when we're putting them on our components, it comes kind of unmarked. Now, there will be instructions that say how you put them on and everything like that, right? But you figure, right, especially with the military, they don't want the attackers to get this stuff.
Yeah. And also a point that you've made before, a lot of this is proprietary. And I think the point that you've made before is open source stuff, the opposing team, they can just buy it, figure it out, right?
Oh, sure, anything online. I mean, you can bet. The CAFE, all these antivirus softwares and everything else, these states, these terrorist states, these organized crime syndicates, they've already got that software, they're already going through it, with fine tooth and comb, just checking and making sure it's all there. It's all public. I wish I knew what that some of that group was made out of, but it's they kind of keep that stuff secret because it's a trade secret for the company too. Because you figure it does not really alter the thermal characteristics of the furnace, not trapping in the heat or anything. So that's it, and allows it to escape.
I think there were some more questions. This gentleman in front.
Yeah, Tom, I'm not a security expert. I'm not a CPU expert. Have not been following Intel on its encryption notes. But I have a really simple, dumb question. When you're generating key, 1/3 at the boot time, 1/3 from the thread itself, and 1/3 actual address of the memory. Once the entire key has been assembled, is there a copy of that key anywhere in the memory of the system?
Yeah, they'll keep a copy of that key within that metallization layer of the cache, but there'll also be a software copy that they work with through Cloudera and stuff to keep that protected. Now, I don't know how well that is protected there. They couldn't really answer me on that. But I'm quite sure that when you work with them on that and you have something, and once that is generated, I would certainly wrap it with a check before I put it back out into the ASD. So I would have some sort of key I picked out in Flash and bring that in and then rewrap that key.
Thanks.
Question.
And here's the thing, right? Anything that you encrypt with any key, you're going to have to make sure you don't lose that key. You can always recall that key because you'll lose that data forever.
That's a good point, and I'm going to cover that some more because there was actually controversies about that. I'll tell you both sides of the argument. There's a question in the back, red shirt.
Yeah, operationally, how do you implement this stuff? So let's say I have to set up a data center. I need to meet some of these certifications. Like, are there hardware vendors out there like HP or IBM that say, I'll sell you a system that has been pre-certified with like this epoxy on the CPUs, or do you go to like a third party to like epoxy on CPUs?
So, Tom, the question was, how do you operationally set up a data center for this? Would you mind if I took this one first, because we kind of went through this drill before?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So here's the good news, is the simple way to go about it is the major vendors, the traditional storage vendors, most not likely the startups, and I've been both in the big guys and the startups, so I kind of have a feeling what the gaps are. But if you go to the big guys, whether it's HDS, NetApp, EMC, IBM, or HP, what you're going to see is HIPS 140-2 level 2. And right there, and you'll notice that I emphasize that. I'll explain that more, because there's a zillion of specs you can read. It'll make you blind, and I can't read anymore. Okay? And so if you look at that, a lot of the stuff can be taken care of for you. Like all the sealants already taken care of, and things like that. And for example, you know, when I mentioned that, and let's say EMC VMAX, they have it out on the disk controller and the ASIC. Well, that thing's, you know that's sealed properly, but it's not sitting on on the main CPU running real hot. So you see the trade-offs there? And like, here's a real case. Like if you're a startup, you have no money, right? You have no money to go build specialized ASICs on this controller. So everybody says, well, let's do it on the CPU. It's cheap. Okay, then more requirements come in. Well, we're one of the fastest devices on the planet. We start loading that encryption on that. We're no longer so fast. And then we say, well, we need to sell the high-end commercial. Oh, they want TIPS 140-2 level 2. Let's apply some sealant. Oops. Runs too hot. Sealants don't adhere to it. So you see the trade-offs? Okay, Tom, did you want to add anything to that?
No. And I think, setting up that the hardware, like you said, a lot of the vendors have that taken care of. But there's a lot of things they don't have taken care of, which I'm sure that you talked about as far as key management, separation flows and stuff.
We're going to go there next. And
Okay.
I'll say that the big vendors, they have specialist teams that understand this stuff really well. But if you imagine a startup, it's like you have no money. Where does the budget get hit? Everybody knows that drill. Okay. So I'm going to go to the next section about key management, and we'll tell you a few stories of where we experienced some controversy. So, well, first, key management is one of the most difficult things about this. Okay, so get a good key management package if you can. Now, if you're going to try to build something, here are the things that will come across your bow. Okay, so the first one is the ability of the customer to change a key. I've seen 2 startups where they're going to issue directives that the customer is not allowed to change their key. So that's one side of the story. And let's say I'm talking to one of the largest medical records companies in the world. Okay? And what they're saying is, oh, you really need to change your key. Okay? And so why? Okay, well, in some places, what you'll want to do is change your key, every year or every 2 years in case you got a silent breach somewhere. There's also the notion of, well, guess what? You might corrupt or lose your key. Okay. And so I've also heard counter arguments. Well, we've created techniques where you could never have a corrupt key or ever lose your key. Well, in the world I come from, the Tier 1 enterprise storage world, there's no room for failure. There's no room for ifs or maybes or sure we can do that. You assume something's going to fail, and you have 2 or 3 backup plans to make sure that you can recover. Because if you got multiple millions of dollars comes to your system per hour, and you got 100 of them, people get kind of upset if things go down. So it's our opinion, which may contradict other people's opinion, but it's based on our opinion as well as talking to large customers that you really need to give the customer an ability to change your key. But there's downstream effects of that. I'm going to jump ahead to this one. It's rekeying the data. Okay, so operationally it sounds scary. Like, when do you ever do that? Well, in the big data centers, whether it's firmware upgrades, what you can do is there'll be windows where you take a small portion of your systems offline. You don't like to do it, but let's say between 1 and 3 in the morning, you take one system offline, and either you apply your firmware or you rekey the data. Okay, and you keep 95% of your systems up. So it's a very small proportion. Okay, and in the case of, let's say, non-disruptive firmware upgrades, for a big data center, it would take you weeks to get it done. Okay, but that's your way around it in order to support the notion of give the customer the ability to change their keys. Now, the next thing that we ran into is storing securely multiple copies of the key. And Tom pointed out previously that if you lose the key, you don't have access to your data. Okay, you can destroy an entire company if you lose your access. So it behooves you to store many copies. And so some of the high-end systems, you'll literally have 8 copies, okay, stored, in flash, some on disk, some in a KEK or key, or a special hardware device that's dedicated to protecting keys. So multiple copies is interesting. Now, one thing we ran into, this is just a side thing of experience, that in theory you could store it on flash, but if you don't refresh that flash periodically, that key can fade away. So you need to understand that and provision for that. So any questions on key management before we go forward? I'm going to keep moving along here. Next one is where to perform encryption and how to do it. I'll just summarize because I've kind of alluded to it. You could do it in the storage world, we call them controllers. Nowadays, many cases are often just super micro servers. And I already pointed out, you got the sealing issue, the FIPS 140-2 level 2 issue. You got the issue of of performance degradation. But on the other hand, it's cheap, right? It's readily available. It's right there for you, so you can use well-known tools. So this is a trade-off. So I would tend to say that, on lower-end applications with less value, okay, do it that way. But if you got a really high-end application, you do like the EMC and the HDS guys did, where you put a dedicated ASIC on a disk controller. Okay, that seems how all the high-end guys do it. But you got to have a lot of money, a lot of people like Tom to find that stuff. Okay. Then there's a third option that I've been seeing a change. Like, I had to change my opinion because I'm not a big fan of self-encrypting disk drives because I just don't like the notion of having the key on there. But see, the problem with my argument, I'm arguing against myself, is for most applications where you're just storing the picture of your grandma's dog, who cares, right? You want to be cheap, fast, and lightweight. So that's just fine. But if you're a $100 billion bank, if you're a national security agency or military, you probably don't want to leave the keys on there because the bad actors, again, we're talking about state-sponsored guys, we're talking about organized terrorists that are well-funded. To put that in context, even the simplest flash thumb drives, they're coming with AES 256-bit ITX on it, okay? And so that seems to be the center of gravity, and it's doable. There's plenty of people that know about it. So unless you have really low-value stuff, you don't want to cheap out. It's more data. Target, they were using triple DES. That's been out of date for a decade. The LinkedIn breach, they were just salting and hashing. So what I can tell out there, Target CEO lost his job, but they're not taking this very seriously. And I probably already made my point about AES 256 ITX being kind of the center of gravity. Next one, which created a lot of confusion, was something called separation of roles. In the high-end operating systems, we just say, yeah, of course we got separation of roles. But in the low-end stuff, like Linux, it's kind of a new concept. And so the question is, why do you do it? Why can't you just have a crypto device, you have your sysadmins to go, load the keys and go? Okay. Well, the reason why, I'll take the easy way out is, let's say Deloitte and Touche IT audits. That's part of your standard IT audits for secure things is separation of roles, because you want to designate let's say the primary encryption system administrator, then the backup, because you want to know who did what, where, why, and when, both as a deterrent as well as if you have to do a forensic criminal investigation. Because the deterrent is, oh, well, I'm the only one that has access to the key. So if I go do this with the key, and there's something called audit logging, which is standard on the high-end gear, which says who did what, where, why, and how. And if it's his login there, they know to come after that guy. Okay. It also deters conspiracy, because if you don't have any clear role and responsibility, two guys could say, well, why don't you do this and I'll do this, and there's no accounting for who did what, where, when, and why. Okay. So on the low-end Linux, I don't think they have the facilities to enable you to easily build separation of roles, or another term you'll see in the industry is role-based security. Okay, and so in the high end, that is, at least we consider it very important.
There are external systems that do it for Linux.
Oh yeah, there's plenty of systems out there that do it, but what I encountered in the startup community was that if you had a team that's primarily Linux-based, the concept of separation of roles is kind of new to them. So I just explained, what you can encounter in that scenario. And over here, certifications. So you notice I place a great deal of emphasis on this, because we could literally fill up pages and pages of various certifications. But you know, one thing I noticed though is a lot of people that talk about this stuff confidently, they never read any of it. So I actually read all of this stuff from front to back. It's really boring. It can make you go blind. But here's the main concept is things like this, they give you some general concepts. But a lot of them refer back to FIPS 140-2 Level 2. And we've already talked about sealants, which is made very clear in here. And we also talked about separation roles, which is made very clear in here. So they'll make general statements over here, but the clarity will be over here. So I'm not saying that not to ignore any of this, especially if there's a new version of this out, but this is something, if you're going to read anything and go blind, this is the one to read, okay? So any questions on that before I move on? I'll just say another one. Common criteria, most of you won't run into it. That's for national security, military stuff. That's mostly just about penetration testing. Okay. I'm going to move on. The next one, excuse me. Hey, Tom, was there any comments that you wanted to make about FIPS 140-2?
No, except, you know, if you're going to work in that area, you should definitely read it and have a fairly decent understanding of what it is.
Yeah.
It really goes through, you know, the separation of roles, the key management, all the different types of levels. It's really, I would call it the size of the people.
Yeah. And also, while you're here, what's your take on AEF 256 ITX?
Yeah, I like, you know, that's basically the one that they came up with that for large databases. And that was the original intent, was for encryption large databases, so they wouldn't have to use counter mode or cyberblock chaining mode, which would have been, you know, eventually you'll get some sort of pattern with the cyberblock chaining mode, and of course ECD would be close to something like that. Well, that's kind of why they came up with the XCS.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. I'd like to go on to the next one, which is secure erase. And this is DoD 5520-22-N. And so the simple concept is you overwrite the media several times, several ways with different patterns. But here's the gotcha, which is, let's say you have a system, but there's going to be places where there's metadata in there, okay? Which, unless you set it up properly, you need to go and erase that metadata. Now, with that said, it also depends on the level of value of your systems. Like on the military side, Tom utilized the case of, let's say you got a helicopter down, opposing teams doing a snatch and grab on the equipment. You're going to want to do auto-zeroization of every element, every buffer in that to make sure the bad guys don't get part of it. On the other hand, if you're protecting, you know, photos of your grandma's dogs, you don't care, right? I'll say that it was funny, well, not funny, but during when Russia invaded New Ossetia, I asked one of our teams, so what does Pentagon say? They said, you know, stand ready to build remote self-destruct systems. Now, I don't know if they're talking about auto-zeroization. I don't know if they're talking C4. We're not very good at that. But it tells you...
Thermite.
Yeah, well, I'm not good at thermite either. But it tells you that that it's trickier than it sounds. Let's see. Okay, so that's secure erase. Oh yeah, one more story. So I was at a national intelligence site in the Far East, and so we were having devices fail preemptively. They're kind of expensive, but they got really upset because they all have specialized grinders. Okay, so I'm going to... Oh, go ahead, Tom.
I want to say with that security race, it is so important that one of the things that you have to have certified before you sell some stuff off to customers or the military is you have to certify that you have enough battery backup to be able to do that security race. It's taken very seriously.
And there's one thing I forgot to mention, and this is our experience with Flash. And it caught us a little by surprise because Flash always writes to a new area. Okay, so might be some data left there. So if you're going to do secure erase, you got to make sure that you erase the old data and the new data. Okay, so that's one gotcha where we got. Made our meetings go longer. Okay, so I'm going to move to close. Say DARE is a complementary technology. You know, there's all the in-flight data encryption, there's firewalls, there's authentication and authorization, separation of roles, and in big high-end commercial fiber channel-based systems, there's FCSP. DARE is just a complement, that's all. And this just gives you a list of a lot of considerations. I won't go through all the details since we covered them a lot already. This just examines some trade-offs of self-encrypting drives versus putting in the storage controller. And the only point I'm going to make here, because this is what caused a lot of long meetings, was let's say I use that case of putting in a disk controller, it helps you scale. Okay. Whereas if you put it in an application or database level, and let's say you got thousands of databases, thousands of applications, it just makes it easier to manage. Let's see. And I'll close by just saying the Storage Network Industry Association's perspective is these are two of the key attacks that they have in data and rest encryption, as well as AES 256 can help you deal with those. So with that said, I'd like to move to close unless there's any questions. Let's see. And